My name is not important. The years have a way of sanding down a man's pride until all that's left is the bone of truth. But the story of Elara Finch, that's a weight I carry still. It happened in the high country, the Sierra Nevada, not the glittering parts they sing about in the saloons. No, the part where the pines grow thin and the air itself feels like a held breath. This was in the autumn of 1884. Elara and her husband, Silas, came from the flatlands of Ohio. They were not prospectors, not at first. They were homesteaders, chasing a promise that the government printed on paper. 160 acres, free land. All you had to do was live on it for 5 years, build a home, and plant your roots deep. They chose a valley that the sun only touched for a few hours a day. It was flanked by 2 granite shoulders of a mountain the local Paiute called the Sleeping Woman. Silas, he was a quiet man, tall, hands like the roots of an old oak. He believed in the logic of things. You plant corn, you get corn. You chop wood, you get warmth. He saw the valley and said, "The soil is dark, Elara, rich. We'll make it sing." Elara, she was the fire, small in frame, but with eyes the color of winter sky. She believed in Silas, not in the land, not in the government, but in the space between his ribs, where his heart beat steady. She followed him into that valley with a wagon that held a plow, a sack of seed corn, a cast-iron skillet, and a hope so fierce it could have lit the night sky. Their first summer was a miracle. The cabin, a rough thing of pine logs with mud chinking, went up fast. They worked from first light until the stars pricked the sky. Elara learned to split wood. Silas learned to read the clouds. They planted late, but the mountain soil was indeed rich. Corn stalks shot up. Potatoes fattened in the ground. They were surviving, but the mountain has a way of watching and waiting. The trouble started with the gold. Not for them, but for the world. A man named Beauchamp, a Frenchman with a velvet vest and a voice like oil, found a vein high up on the sleeping woman's shoulder, a quartz blow that glittered like the devil's teeth. Suddenly, our quiet valley became a thoroughfare for men with mules, dynamite, and desperation. Silas tried to ignore it. Gold is a fever, he told Elara one night, as they sat on their porch, watching the dust rise from the new trail a mile below. It burns a man up. We have what we need. And they did, for a while. But the winter of '84 came early. It came like a thief. One week, the aspens were turning gold. The next, a wind from the north swept down, and the world turned white. The snow did not fall gently. It came in fury, burying the pass, sealing the valley off from the rest of the world. They were ready. Silas had stacked hay for the mule, salted pork, dried beans. He was a man who planned. But the gold fever had brought something else into the valley. Rats. Not the animal kind, though there were those too. The human kind. 3 men, stragglers from Beauchamp's failed camp up the mountain, came down through the blizzard. They were half-frozen, hollow-eyed. Their names were Dutchy, Red, and a man they called the Preacher, though he had no book and no God in his voice. Silas let them stay in his barn. He was a man of logic. You don't let a man freeze to death in a Christian country. Elara, she watched them from the cabin window. Her instinct was a wolf's instinct. She saw the way Dutchy's eyes scanned their root cellar. She saw the way Red licked his lips when she brought out bread. And the Preacher, he just smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. They stayed for 3 days. The snow did not relent. Silas shared his firewood, his salt pork, his coffee. His salt pork, his coffee. He treated them as equals, even as they grew stronger, and he grew thinner from sharing his stores. On the 4th night, the wind died. An untroubled quiet settled over the valley. The kind of quiet before a shot is fired. I wasn't there, you understand. I was a boy then, living 30 miles away in a mining camp. But I came through after. I pieced it together from the tracks in the snow, from the things left behind, from the look on Elara's face when they found her. It started with the mule. Silas loved that mule. A stubborn, loyal creature named Clover. The men killed Clover. Not for meat, not out of hunger. They killed her to show Silas that the walls of his logic were made of paper. They slaughtered her in the lean-to and left her there. A warning. Silas went out with his rifle, the cold air burning in his lungs. He was angry. For the first time, the logic failed him. He couldn't understand why men would take from a man who gave. He couldn't understand cruelty for its own sake. He found them in his own barn. They had taken his tools, his extra harness. They were packing to leave as soon as the pass cleared. "You'll pay for the mule," Silas said, his voice steady, but his hands shaking on the rifle. The preacher stood up. He was the tallest of them. He didn't have a gun. He had a piece of stove wood in his hand. "Pay," the preacher said. "With what, friend? You think there's a sheriff out here? You think there's a law for a man who owns a hole in the ground and a dead mule?" Silas raised the rifle. He should have shot. A man of logic would have shot. But Silas was a farmer. A man who planted seeds. He hesitated. Red came from the side. He was quick. A snake. He hit Silas across the back of the head with a rock. The rifle fired into the roof. Silas fell into the snow, and he did not get up. They left him there. They went into the cabin. Elara was inside. She had heard the shot. She had seen her husband fall through the crack in the door. She was not a woman of logic. She was a woman of fire. She did not scream. She did not beg. She took the one thing of value they had, a leather pouch of gold dust. Silas had found it months ago, panning in the creek. Not enough to make them rich, but enough to buy new tools, enough to pay for a new mule, their future. She slipped it into her apron pocket. The men kicked the door in. The preacher led them. "We just need supplies," he said. That smile still on his face. "The pass is opening. We'll be gone by morning." They ransacked the cabin. They took the salt pork, the last of the beans, the coffee, Silas's good wool coat. Red found Elara's wedding ring on the windowsill. A thin gold band. He took it. Dutchy was the one who saw the fear in her eyes when they got near the corner where her apron hung. He was the stupid one, but he was observant. He grabbed her arm. His fingers left bruises that would last for weeks. "What's in the pocket?" he asked. She said nothing. Her eyes were on the window, on the dark shape of Silas lying in the snow. Red came over. He was rougher. He shoved her against the stone hearth. The corner of it bit into her back. He ripped the apron from her waist. The pouch of gold fell out, hit the floorboards with a soft, heavy thud. The preacher picked it up. He weighed it in his hand. His smile finally vanished. "All this," he said, looking at Elara, his voice cold as the wind outside, "and you let us sleep in your barn on bread and water. You let us freeze while you had this." He didn't wait for an answer. They took the gold. They took the last of the warmth, and then they left. 3 shadows moving toward the pass, leaving the door swinging open, the cold pouring in like a flood. Here is the twist, the part that makes this story a scar on the land. Elara did not go to Silas. Not at first. She was frozen, not by the cold, but by the fire inside her. The betrayal, not from the men. She expected nothing from them, but from Silas. In that moment, her mind was a trap. He had let them in. He had trusted, and now he lay in the snow, and their gold was gone, and their food was gone, and the winter was just beginning. A cold anger took hold of her, a survivor's anger. She closed the door. She banked the fire. She wrapped herself in a blanket, and she sat in the dark, and she did not go out. For 3 days, she did not go out. The snow fell again, covering the tracks of the men, covering the shape of Silas. She told herself he was dead. The blow to the head, the cold. He had to be dead. She was alone. And alone, she could survive. The anger told her that. It told her that Silas's kindness had been a weakness. She would not be weak. She ate the last scraps of food she had hidden, a bit of dried apple, some cornmeal. She rationed it. She melted snow for water. She did not weep. On the third night, the fire almost died. She went out to the woodpile. The wind had stopped. The moon was a sliver of ice in a black sky, and as she bent to pick up a piece of kindling, she saw it, a hand, reaching out from the snowdrift by the barn. Her breath caught in her throat. The kindling fell from her fingers. It was Silas. He had not died. He had crawled. For 3 days, with a fractured skull and frozen limbs, he had crawled toward the cabin. The sun now had covered him, buried him, but he had kept crawling. He had not reached the door. He had stopped just feet away. Elara ran. She fell to her knees beside him, digging at the snow with her bare hands until her fingers bled. She turned him over. His face was white, his lips blue. His eyes were closed, crusted with ice. But his chest, it moved. A shallow, fluttering movement, a heartbeat fighting the silence. She dragged him inside. Every inch of that frozen ground was a battle. She got him to the hearth. She piled every scrap of wood she had onto the fire. She wrapped him in the blankets she had hoarded for herself. She put her own body against his, her warmth against his cold. And she wept. For 3 days she had held her tears like a shield. Now they came, not for the gold, not for the cabin, but for the 3 days she had let him lie in the snow while she sat in her anger. She nursed him through the night. She fed him melted snow, drop by drop. She rubbed his hands, his feet, his face. She talked to him. She told him about the corn they would plant in the spring. She told him about the new mule they would buy, a younger one, a stronger one. She told him about the window she wanted to put in the east wall so the morning sun would wake them. She promised him. She promised him. She promised him she would not let the cold take him. For 3 weeks she fought. The food was gone. She hunted rabbits with a trap she fashioned from wire. She dug through the snow to the root cellar, finding a few shriveled potatoes that the men had missed. She burned the furniture, piece by piece, to keep the fire alive. The rocking chair Silas had made her, the table where they ate, the shelves he had carved. She did not leave his side. His fever came and went. He spoke in whispers, words that made no sense, words from Ohio, from his childhood. He called for his mother. He called for Elara, even, when she was holding him. And then, on a morning when the sun finally broke over the mountain, painting the valley in pale gold, Silas opened his eyes. He looked at her. His eyes were clear. The fever had broken. He reached up with a hand that was thin as a branch and touched her face. "The gold," he whispered. "Did they take it?" She nodded. Tears fell from her cheeks onto his chest. He smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when he first saw the valley. A smile of quiet, stubborn hope. "Good," he said. "Let them have it. It was never ours anyway." He lived for 2 more days. He was too weak. The damage to his head, the cold that had seeped into his bones, it was too much for even Elara's fire to burn away. He died on a Thursday, just as the snow began to melt. He died holding her hand, looking at the patch of sky through the hole in the roof where the smoke escaped. He was not a man of many words. His last were simple. "Plant the corn, Elara. Make it sing." She buried him in the spring. The ground was soft, the wildflowers beginning to push through. She buried him at the edge of the field they had cleared together. She did not mark the grave with a stone. She marked it with the plow. That summer, she planted the corn. She planted it alone, the seed corn the men had missed, hidden under a floorboard. She worked from dawn until dusk. Her hands blistered and bled. Her back ached. The neighbors, what few there were, offered to help. She refused. This was her promise. That autumn, the corn grew tall, taller than any corn in the valley. The ears were full, the kernels like gold teeth in the sun. The sleeping woman mountain watched over her, silent and grey. She did not sell that corn. She did not eat it all. She saved the best of it. The next year, she planted again, and the year after that. The story of Elara Finch became a quiet legend in those parts. Not a legend of gold, but of something they didn't have a word for back then. Grit, maybe. Love, maybe. Or maybe. Or maybe just the stubborn refusal to let the mountain win. The men who took her gold, they were found 3 years later in a ravine on the other side of the pass. Their bones were scattered, their clothes torn. The gold was gone. The mountain had taken it back, or the creek had washed it away, or maybe a bear had scattered it to the four winds. The preacher's skull had a crack in it. Dutchy's hand was still clutching a rock. Red, they never found Red's boots. They say the gold was cursed. I don't believe in curses. I believe in choices. I believe in choices. Elara chose to open the door on that third night. She chose to drag her husband's frozen body into the warmth. She chose to plant the corn, and I am an old man now. I came to this valley 40 years ago, chasing the same fever. I found only the remnants of a cabin, a collapsed roof, and a field of wild corn that grew in a perfect square. Even though no one had planted it in decades. I found a woman too, old, bent, her eyes still the color of winter sky. She lived in a small cabin she had built with her own hands at the edge of the cornfield. She did not speak much, but she let me stay one night. I asked her if she ever regretted it. The gold, the men, the winter. She was stirring a pot of corn porridge over a low fire. She did not look up. Gold buys a man a mule, she said, her voice like dry leaves. But it can't buy back a morning. It can't buy the sound of a man breathing beside you in the dark. She pointed out the window. The moon was rising over the sleeping woman. The snow on the peak glowed silver. I have the corn, she said. Every year it sings. She died that winter, peacefully, they say. She was found in her rocking chair, facing the window, looking at the mountain. In her lap was a single ear of corn. The kernels were not gold. They were white, white as snow, white as the morning light. They buried her beside Silas. The field of corn went wild after that, but it never died. Even now, when the snow melts in the spring, you can see the green shoots pushing up through the mud. A farmer's promise, a love letter written in soil. The mountain took a lot from this valley. It took men's dreams. It took their souls. But it could not take Elara's corn, because some things are worth more than gold. And the silence of the mountain, it is not an empty silence. If you listen close, on a quiet night, you can hear the rustle of the corn stalks in the wind. It sounds like singing. It sounds like home.